When I married James, I truly believed I had found the one. A caring, responsible, and honest man. Our story felt like something out of a romantic film. Rainy walks under gloomy skies, late-night talks filled with whispered promises, and dreams of building a life together. He had this way with words, the kind that made you feel like the world was wrapped in a warm blanket just for the two of you. I remember him painting pictures with his voice. Imagine waking up in our own house, he'd say, the scent of fresh coffee drifting through the kitchen while you read your paper on the porch, and I'm flipping pancakes just the way you like. Wrapped in his arms, I laughed and believed every single word. We started talking seriously about building our home. I had a modest flat in a quiet suburb of Brighton, something I'd held onto tightly, a piece of my past I wasn't ready to let go of. But James insisted, if we sell your flat, we can have a great start. I'll cover the rest. I'll manage the build, the paperwork, everything. Trust me. And so, I parted with my flat, selling it for a tidy sum that we combined with my savings. That was the beginning. James found a plot of land just outside Lewes, through some contacts, claiming it was a steal, almost a gift. He insisted on registering both the land and the house under his name, saying it would be easier that way while I was busy with work. I didn't think twice. Why would I? We were building a future together. The construction began. I threw myself into picking out tiles, paint colors, doors, every detail mattered. I imagined the house filled with laughter, friends gathered in the garden, flowers lining the windowsills. But James started to pull away, consulting me less and less, brushing off my questions as just busy. He assured me everything was under control, but I often found myself visiting the site alone. The walls went up, the roof took shape, but I was always learning about progress after the fact. Once I asked why he'd ordered the windows without me. He waved it off, they're standard. You'd have chosen the same anyway. Each month I poured more money into the project, materials, workers, furnishings, watching my dream take shape but slowly feeling the distance grow. James began staying late at the building site, sometimes disappearing for days, claiming he was keeping an eye on things. Occasionally, I caught glimpses of messages on his phone from a woman named Claire, but I never asked. Trusting felt easier than doubting. One Saturday, I decided to visit the site alone. James had an important meeting as usual. I packed a flask of coffee, planning a quiet day admiring the finishing touches. Driving up, my heart sank. Children were playing in the yard. A little boy wielding a wooden sword. A girl zooming past on a scooter with a doll in tow. By the porch stood a woman, confidently directing the workers as if she owned the place. I introduced myself as James's wife and explained we were building the house together. She smiled sweetly and said her name was Claire, that she and James had children, and they were moving in soon. The world tilted beneath me. My knees buckled and cold numbness crept through me. I barely managed to ask what she meant. The house is almost done, she said cheerfully, it's for us. The kids are excited. We've waited so long that I didn't answer. I got in the car and drove away, leaving the coffee forgotten on the seat. My mind was a storm of disbelief and betrayal. Back home, I wandered the apartment like a ghost, calling James repeatedly, no answer. I sent a message begging to talk, but silence remained. When he finally came back that evening, acting as if nothing had happened, kissed me on the cheek, and went to wash his hands, I looked at him and felt nothing but a hollow rage. I asked him if he'd been at the site that day. He froze, admitted a little. I pressed about the woman, Claire, claiming the house was for her and their children. He sighed and rubbed his face, telling me it was complicated, that she was in a tough spot with expensive rented flats, and he had just wanted to help. I was silent, the words hitting me like stones. He rambled on, trying to justify, saying I had once told him we could build another better house, that the money wasn't as important as the relationship. But I saw the truth behind his eyes. I had sold everything, every penny, every hope, into this house believing it was ours. Now he spoke of another. Something inside me broke. I retreated to the bedroom, grabbed my phone, and with shaking hands recorded a video. My voice trembled as I said my name was Emily, James's wife, that I had invested everything, money, time, love, into building a home. Now he wanted to house his ex-wife and children there. Tears welled up, but I held it together long enough to send the video to my friend Laura, a solicitor. Minutes later she replied, "Gather all the bank transfers, receipts, any proof of payments. The house was registered in his name, but we could fight this. I stepped out to find James calmly pouring himself a cup of tea in the kitchen, pretending nothing was wrong. I confronted him coldly, demanding answers. He smirked, tried to downplay everything, calling it not as bad as I thought. I challenged him, reminding him how much I'd put in and how he never consulted me. He admitted it was a mistake, said he just wanted to help Claire and her kids for a while. I lost it. Was he out of his mind? We had planned this house for us, I had invested nearly £50,000, and he hadn't even told me about the ex moving in? He claimed the house was in his name for convenience. I brandished my phone, recording his admission. When he lunged to grab the device, I held firm. I had copies of everything: messages, bank statements, receipts. I called him a traitor. He retreated, pacing like a trapped animal, begging me to avoid war. But how could I? He had lived off my trust and money, promised me a future, then tried to erase me from it. When I told him I was taking legal action, he collapsed on the sofa, hiding his face. I packed my things silently, feeling like part of me had been ripped out and stomped on. James watched, offering weak excuses while I zipped up my suitcase to the door. I gave him one last look and said that a home wasn't just bricks and mortar, it was built on trust, and he had shattered that foundation. I closed the door behind me, swallowed the emptiness and rage, and stepped into freedom. I took a cab to Laura's flat. She greeted me like a sister, leading me straight to the kitchen with a knowing look and a cup of hot tea. She'd seen the video. I nodded, trembling with anger rather than fear. We spent hours going through every receipt, bank statement, and message. The deeper I dug, the more it was clear. James had coldly planned this, staging the project under his name, then quietly inviting Claire in. Laura prepared the claim, and the next day we closed the joint account, freezing the remaining funds. James called, trying to twist the story, claiming it was temporary and he meant to talk to me. I forwarded his messages to Laura, who just scoffed, classic manipulation. We filed for court within days. When James realized what was happening, he called Laura, who put him on speakerphone and told him bluntly that adults don't use their wives as bank accounts for exes. He tried to argue, threaten, and plead, but his confidence crumbled when he saw I wasn't backing down. The court case was swift. I sat tall in the courtroom, eyes locked on him in his expensive suit, smug at first but growing desperate as the evidence piled up. Laura presented everything meticulously: bank transfers, invoices, even recordings where James admitted the house was built with my money. His lawyer's feeble defense about voluntary payments was torn apart by the judge's sharp words about breach of trust. On the final day, James tried to play the victim, claiming he acted out of kindness because Claire was homeless with kids. The judge cut him off, saying if he'd wanted to be humane, he should have sorted things out with his lawful wife first, not afterwards. I felt an odd calm, like finally slamming shut a suitcase I'd hauled around forever. The verdict was clear. The court recognized my financial contributions and ordered James to compensate me fully, including damages for emotional distress, freezing his assets until he paid. He tried to appeal but failed miserably. The house he wanted to gift Claire was now out of his reach. I heard Claire moved out soon after, probably sensing the betrayal stink reaching her too. James was left alone, drowning in debts and a ruined reputation. I moved into a small rental flat in Hove. Nothing fancy but bright, fresh, and mine. For the first time in years, I woke up without dread. Weeks after the court, James sent me a message claiming he understood everything and wanted to start over. I looked at the screen and laughed, bitter, loud, and liberating. I remembered every brick, every sleepless night, every broken promise. There was no going back. I deleted his number and felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was reclaiming myself, my dignity, and my life without those who betrayed me. Starting over felt like standing at the edge of a vast empty field, both terrifying and exhilarating. The small flat in Hove wasn't much, but it had large windows that let the sunlight spill in like a gentle promise. The walls were freshly painted a soft cream, and the faint scent of paint still lingered in the air, mingling with the salty breeze from the sea. I'd never imagined freedom would smell like that. I furnished the place simply: an inviting cream sofa, a glass coffee table scattered with books and magazines, and a few framed photographs of places I wanted to visit one day. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Mine to mess up or mend as I pleased. I found an old navy blue dress in a charity shop during one of my early outings. It hugged my curves just right, with delicate lace trimming the neckline and a slit that showed just enough leg to feel daring without shouting for attention. I paired it with a pair of black suede ankle boots that clicked confidently on the pavement. It was my quiet rebellion, my way of saying I was still here, still whole, and maybe even a little dangerous. The first few weeks were a strange mix of numbness and restless energy. I kept busy, taking long walks along the seafront, exploring little cafes where I'd sip flat whites and scribble in my journal, trying to untangle the mess inside my head. Sometimes I'd catch myself smiling at nothing, feeling a spark of something I hadn't in a long time, hope, but the shadows of betrayal still lingered. Every time my phone buzzed, a flicker of anxiety would shoot through me. Would it be James? Another reminder of what I'd lost. One afternoon I met a woman named Sarah at a local bookshop. She was in her early 30s, with chestnut curls that framed her freckled face and a quick, witty smile that made the corners of her eyes crinkle. Sarah had a knack for making the mundane feel magical, like finding secret worlds in the pages of a dusty novel. We struck up an easy friendship, sharing stories over steaming cups of Earl Grey and laughing about the ridiculousness of online dating disasters and the perils of assembling flat-pack furniture without losing your sanity. Sarah had her own scars, and somehow, sharing ours made the load lighter. She reminded me that I wasn't alone, that sometimes the best way to heal was to let others in, even if only a little. Her kindness was a balm, and I found myself looking forward to our weekly coffee dates with a flutter of anticipation I hadn't felt in ages. But even as I began to rebuild, the legal battle with James loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. Court dates, lawyer meetings, and endless paperwork filled my days. Laura was relentless, sometimes too much so, but I was grateful. She was more than a solicitor. She was a warrior on my side. Her sharp mind and unwavering belief in justice kept me grounded when doubt gnawed at me. The hardest part was facing James in court. Every time he sat across from me, smug and polished, I felt a flicker of the old pain. But I held my head high, reminding myself that I was fighting not just for a house, but for my dignity. The courtroom was a battlefield, and Laura wielded the truth like a sword, slicing through his lies and excuses with precision. I sat quietly, watching as the scales of justice slowly tipped in my favor. Outside the courtroom one chilly morning, I caught sight of Claire. She looked smaller than I remembered, her confident facade crumbling like the peeling paint on the building behind her. Our eyes met and I saw a flash of regret, or was it fear? I didn't know and I didn't want to. I had my own path to walk now. One evening, as I was locking up the flat, I noticed a small envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a single key and a note written in a familiar handwriting. For when you're ready. My heart raced, confusion and curiosity battling inside me. Who could it be from? Was it a peace offering, a trap, or something else entirely? I stared at the key long after the sun had set, the shadows in the room stretching and twisting like unanswered questions. The past was behind me, but this key felt like a door unopened, an invitation or a warning. I didn't know what lay beyond it, but I knew one thing for sure. My story was far from over. The key weighed heavy in my palm, colder than I expected, as if it carried the chill of all the secrets it locked away. I traced its edges thoughtfully, wondering what door it belonged to, and why someone would leave it for me with such a cryptic message. For when you're ready. Ready for what? Forgiveness? Revenge? Or simply to face the truth I'd been running from? Days passed, and the key remained tucked away in my bedside drawer, a silent taunt lurking just beneath the surface of my new life. I threw myself deeper into my routine work, walks along the pier, coffee with Sarah. But every time my fingers brushed against that cold metal, a knot tightened in my stomach. One rainy afternoon, the kind of drizzle that soaks into your bones and makes you consider the meaning of life while standing at a bus stop, I finally gave in. I grabbed the key and headed to the address scrawled on the back of the note. It was an old Victorian townhouse on a quiet street in Lewes, its brick facade worn but dignified, with ivy curling around the window frames. The kind of place that whispered stories if you listen closely. The door was locked, naturally, but the key slid in smoothly and turned without resistance. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old wood and forgotten memories. Dust motes danced in the pale light filtering through lace curtains. The house seemed frozen in time, like a snapshot of a life paused abruptly. I wandered from room to room, each filled with traces of a life I hadn't known existed. Photographs in worn frames, James with Claire and their children smiling and carefree. A pile of unopened letters on the sideboard, yellowed and curling at the edges. A half-finished knitting project on a chair, as if someone had just stepped out and never returned. The house felt like a shrine to a past I'd been kept from. A world where I was an outsider looking in the kitchen. I found a small box tucked away on a shelf. Inside were letters, handwritten, heartfelt and raw. They were from Claire to James, confessing struggles, hopes, and fears. Reading them, I saw a woman grappling with hardship, not just a rival in my story. The lines between betrayal and compassion blurred, and for a moment I felt a strange kinship. But then, tucked beneath the letters was another note, this one addressed to me. It was from James. He wrote about mistakes, regrets, and a warning. Something he'd hidden deep in the house, something that could change everything. He begged me to find it before others did, hinting at dangers lurking beneath the surface of the life he'd built. A life more tangled and dangerous than I'd imagined. My pulse quickened. The quiet house suddenly felt charged, alive with secrets waiting to be uncovered. I wasn't just a woman scorned anymore. I was a player in a game I didn't fully understand, with stakes higher than a broken heart or a lost home. I pocketed the note and stepped outside into the damp evening air. The sky was bruised purple, and the street lamps flickered on one by one, casting long shadows. I realized then that the past I thought I'd left behind was only the beginning. The true test of my strength, my courage, and my resolve was just beginning, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of a door closing echoed, a signal that some secrets refused to stay buried forever. That night sleep eluded me, my mind tangled in shadows and half-formed theories. I kept turning James's note over and over, the words echoing in my head like a cryptic riddle. What could he have hidden in that house? Something valuable? Dangerous? Or just a final act of desperation? The mystery gnawed at me, stirring a restless curiosity I couldn't ignore. The next morning, I returned to the Victorian house with a flashlight and a resolve hardened by months of betrayal and loss. The room seemed quieter now, holding their breath as if waiting for me to uncover their secrets. I started by checking the obvious places: the attic, the cellar behind loose panels. The old floorboards creaked beneath my feet, a soundtrack to my cautious exploration. In the cellar, the damp air wrapped around me like a cloak. Cobwebs brushed my face, and the scent of earth and mold filled my lungs. There, beneath a loose stone near the cold wall, I found a small rusted tin box. My fingers trembled as I pried it open. Inside was a collection of papers, documents, photographs, and a USB stick taped to the bottom. The documents revealed a tangled web of financial dealings far messier than I'd imagined. There were contracts, bank statements, and correspondence hinting at money laundering and hidden assets. Photos showed James meeting with men I didn't know, in places that looked less like Brighton and more like the kind of back alleys you see in crime dramas. My stomach churned. The man I thought I knew was a stranger living a double life, but I plugged the USB into my laptop back at the flat. The files were encrypted, but Laura had connections, people who could help. As I waited for her to work her legal magic, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stepped into something far bigger than a personal betrayal. This was no longer just about a ruined marriage or a stolen home. It was about uncovering a truth that could shatter everything. Days blurred into nights as I balanced work, court dates, and this new secret investigation. Sarah noticed the change in me, the way my eyes darkened with determination, the restless energy that made me pace the flat at odd hours. She never pried, but her steady presence was a lifeline. Then one evening, as I returned from a late meeting with Laura, I found the flat door ajar. My heart slammed against my ribs. Inside, nothing seemed disturbed, but on the kitchen table lay a single playing card, the Queen of Hearts. My pulse quickened. It was a message. A warning. Someone was watching. Fear prickled along my skin, but it was laced with something fiercer: defiance. I wasn't going to run. Whoever was trying to intimidate me had no idea who they were dealing with. I spent the next days securing the flat, installing cameras, and keeping my phone close. Laura's contacts decrypted the files, revealing names and transactions linked to James's secret dealings. This wasn't just a failed relationship, it was a criminal labyrinth, and I was caught in the middle. One night, as I sat by the window watching the rain blur the city lights, I realized how far I'd come. From a naive woman dreaming of a perfect home to a fighter unearthing dark truths. The road ahead was uncertain, dangerous even, but I felt alive in a way I never had before. And then, just as I was beginning to piece everything together, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You're closer than you think. But some doors once opened can never be closed. I swallowed hard, a shiver running down my spine. The game was on and there was no turning back now. The message lingered on my screen like a shadow, dark and unrelenting. I stared at it long after the glow of my phone had dimmed, feeling the weight of its warning settle deep inside me. Whoever was sending these notes knew more than I thought, and they wanted me to know it. It was both a threat and an invitation, wrapped in the same cryptic sentence. The kind of message that makes your skin crawl and your blood run hotter all at once. Sleep became a distant memory. Nights were spent scanning the street from my window, heart racing every time a shadow moved just a little too quickly, every unexpected sound setting my nerves on edge. I replaced light curtains with blackout blinds, locked every door twice, and kept my phone within arm's reach, ready for anything. But despite the fear, a fierce determination burned brighter inside me. I wasn't about to let whoever this was scare me into silence. Laura was my constant anchor. She worked tirelessly connecting dots, digging through layers of James's secret life. The more we uncovered, the darker the picture became. Offshore accounts, shell companies, coded transactions, evidence pointing to a network far beyond a broken marriage. James wasn't just a man who betrayed me. He was tangled in something dangerous, something that reached into the underbelly of the city. One chilly morning, Laura handed me a thick envelope. Inside were copies of documents she'd obtained through discreet channels, proof of illegal activities, disguised as legitimate business. It was enough to bring down not just James but others lurking in the shadows. But she warned me to tread carefully. These people didn't play fair. I felt like I was living two lives, the determined woman fighting for justice by day, and the hunted prey by night. My interactions with Sarah became my refuge. She insisted I take breaks to breathe and laugh, reminding me that even in the darkest times, life could still surprise you with moments of light. We explored hidden corners of Brighton, indulged in late-night ice cream runs, and shared secrets that only those who've been broken and rebuilt can truly understand. But the feeling of being watched never left me. One evening, as I returned from a quiet dinner with Sarah, I noticed a shadow slipping away from the building across the street. My pulse quickened. Was it just a passerby? Or someone keeping tabs on me? My instincts screamed to run, but I stayed put, locking the door behind me and checking every window. That night, a small package arrived without a return address. Inside was a worn leather-bound journal, its pages filled with handwriting I recognized instantly, James's. The entries detailed his descent into a world I'd only glimpsed through documents. Deals made in back rooms, whispered threats, and the constant fear of being caught. But buried within the chaos was something unexpected. A confession of guilt, a plea for redemption, and a promise to protect someone he loved. The ambiguity twisted my gut. Who was he protecting? Me? Claire? Or someone else entirely? I read the journal over and over, searching for clues, desperate to understand the man I thought I knew. Each page was a puzzle piece, but the picture remained incomplete, shrouded in secrets and lies. Then, late one night, the power at my flat flickered and went out, plunging me into darkness. The familiar hum of the city faded, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by the distant sound of footsteps. My heart pounded as I fumbled for my phone's flashlight, scanning every corner of the room. A faint rustling came from the kitchen. Holding my breath, I crept toward the sound, only to find the window slightly ajar, curtains fluttering in the cold breeze. Someone had been here. Fear surged, but so did a steely resolve. This was no longer just about reclaiming what was stolen. It was about uncovering the truth hidden beneath layers of betrayal, danger, and deception. And I knew deep down that the key I'd found was only the beginning. As I closed the window and secured the locks, a single thought echoed in my mind. Some doors, once opened, don't just reveal secrets, they can change everything forever.